Okay, so let's get the show on the road. All right, last session. So I've got a couple files for us to actually download. Um, so I'm going to paste them into the chat now. So that's file number 1. And that's file number 2. So the first file is called Mastery Building, and that is a sort of like an ongoing pathway for building mastery. No big surprise there. So like, how can we actually get ourselves the practice, the feedback, the learning? How are we going to take this skill that we've been learning here and take it to the next level? So that's what that is all about. And the second thing is looped in with that. The second item is what we refer to as the Mighty Guide. So Mighty Code 4.2.1. So what is the Mighty Code? So to a certain extent, I've already introduced you to portions of the Mighty Code. And the Mighty Code is going to be able to like play a part in our continued development today and beyond as we go into the future of how we use these MI skills in different applications. So remember when I had you like draw a horizontal line, and on the left-hand side, I had you write confront and persuade? You remember that? And then on the right-hand side, bow to the right, I had you write the words emphasize autonomy, seek collaboration, complex reflection. Okay, so what we were doing there is we were actually creating a continuum of where the evidence mathematically for motivational interviewing lies. So those things on the left, those were actually scientifically demonstrated to evoke resistance and make our audience less likely to change. And so how did we actually know that confront and persuade makes somebody less likely to change? We know it because the Mighty Code 4.2.1 actually created those measurable codable headers to describe different communications. So when we, as an interviewer, use a statement that can be coded as a confront, then we know that this is very likely to draw out resistance language from our audience. And we know that the more resistance language that our audience shares, the more resistant to change they become, and they become less likely to change their behaviors. So when we say that motivational interviewing is an evidence-based approach, that's really one of the things we're talking about. We also know that the things over on the right-hand side, these complex reflections, emphasizing autonomy, affirmation, seeking collaboration, these 4 things far to the right, these things are correlated with people using less resistance language. And specifically also more language about change. So when they use more language that we refer to as change talk, then they become more likely to change. And that is also part of the Mighty Code. So this idea of like characterizing or categorizing our utterances as an interviewer in one of these buckets makes our language as an interviewer measurable. So the Mighty Code 4.2.1 is the measurement system of motivational interviewing that is most commonly used. So that's what the Mighty Code is. Give me 1 sec, I just want to, so can I ask everybody to pull up the Mastery Building PowerPoint file that I shared with you all? And then give me a little plus sign in the chat when you're ready. I'm going to be off not seeing you. So give me a plus sign instead of a thumbs up this time, because I just want to review my notes real quick here for our activity. So we're looking at the mastery building. So this first slide, it says learning, practice, feedback. So that's what this is all about. So we know there's actually been research in the motivational interviewing field about how people get better at motivational interviewing. And we actually know how, and it's these three elements. So the past, like the intro and the 6 sessions that we've been having, these have been focusing more heavily on learning with some practice and some feedback, as much as we can really get in now, you know, but we really did have to front load some of the learning just so we even know what we're talking about. So this event will still have some learning, but we're going to start to really shift the balance towards practice and feedback, and try to set you up in a trajectory so that you'll be able to get more of that practice and feedback in the future, because that's going to be some of the bigger things that you're missing. So that's what this entire 6-series session or 6-session series has really all been about, is building you up to this point where you can actually have a ability to have like sustainable practice and sustainable feedback for yourself. So for that, we want to introduce this concept known as EPE. So EPE, of course, this is an acronym, and this is describing the way that we give feedback to others on their motivational interviewing. And if we can practice it with others, then we can also use this method to give ourselves feedback, which is a little bit more challenging because we have to turn the lens at ourselves, and sometimes being objective with ourselves can be difficult. So we'll practice first by using this method with somebody else in this group, and then we're going to try to turn the lens on ourselves and try and give ourselves our first piece of feedback using this method. So what does EPE stand for? So EPE stands for, the first E is elicit. The second letter is P, which stands for provide. And in this case, we're really providing MI feedback. And I'm going to put that in like all caps, screamy mode, because we're not trying to provide something else. We may have a lot of ideas in our head about what might be a great quick fix. So it's not EAE, it's not elicit advice elicit, it's elicit provide MI feedback. And then the last word is elicit again. So we want to elicit, we want to find out where they're at. Our second P is we provide the MI feedback, and we want to use lots of words like might. Might is our best friend. We want to almost like hear the word might and kind of just be like, might you do that? Might I bring the phone in? Might I sit on that chair? Might I drink some water? Might I? So practicing might is going to really get yourself into sort of like the right way to say it. Might. As much might as you can muster, that's what we want here. Maybe that's why they call it the mighty code instead of the MIDI code, because it's like specifically looking like MIDI to me. So I never actually thought about that till right now. So we elicit, where are they at? We provide our MI feedback, and then we elicit, how might something like that work for you? What do you think? So really what we're doing in that last elicit is we're emphasizing their autonomy. Could there be something here that's useful for you? I don't know. Is there any way for you to take this and kind of run with it, make it your own? Like, I don't know. You tell me. So it's all about turning over that autonomy. Okay, so let's actually go to, I think we're ready for our first activity. Yes. So thoughts, questions, feelings on EPE before we go get started on our first activity. Okay. I don't see any like hand waving. So our first activity is going to be in pairs. So what we're going to do is we are going to go into breakout sessions, and we're going to be in pairs, and we will be talking about, I have the focus change target right here. I'm just going to copy it in. Okay, so we're going to have a motivational interview with each other. So it's just going to be two of you, and the change target of the day will be known by you and the interviewee is how can I improve my MI? How can I improve my MI skills? So what I want everybody to do, when I just did this activity last week with another group, they wanted me to kind of do like sort of a 2-minute sort of like primer just to kind of help everybody get in the right MI mindset. So are you in that same place right now? Should I do a 2-minute sort of summary of our, okay. So let's go back to the beginning. Session 1. We want to bring ourselves into the MI band of emotions. We are feeling curiosity towards the people in the room. We are feeling compassion, non-judgment. Maybe the people in the room will want to improve their MI skills. Maybe they're not sure what their direction is. Either way, this is where they're at, and that's what's important. We're focused on them and drawing out and learning about where they're at in their MI skills journey. And then we're going to be listening. We're going to channel that MI band of emotions into very, very deep listening. We're going to understand what has been their journey so far. What are the challenges? Do they see some challenges in the future? Maybe they don't. Maybe they already have a plan. Or maybe there's a plan right at their fingertips. We're going to be learning, engaging, just connecting with them. We focused in on this topic, the how can I improve on my MI skills? After we focus in and really come together on this topic that we're looking at, we're going to evoke and say, okay, well, here on this lay of the land, you're in the middle of this grassy field, and you need to really discover where they're at in their MI journey. So what's over to the west? Well, those are all their preconceived notions about what they thought was MI, but maybe they've let go of some of those, but there's still a few hanging on. Oh, and then over here, this is what they would like to accomplish. Maybe over here are some of the things that they want to actually let go of. They're kind of like residuals of environmental communications of what they did in the past, and maybe they want to move on from. We're evoking, we're drawing out and learning about where they're at. We're using our utterances to reflect back our understanding. We don't demonstrate understanding by saying we understand. We really demonstrate our understanding by turning that listening into a very deep understanding and communicating it in our own words. We communicate how it feels to them. How does MI feel to you? And we communicate that because we're listening to their body language. We're able to communicate how this feels deeply for them. We're going through the 4 processes, and when they're ready, we listen to when they're ready to maybe pursue a plan, and we ask them in a transitional statement, we summarize what are their viscerally held reasons why they might not do it. Maybe there aren't any. Then we summarize what are their reasons for change. And ultimately we ask them, so what might be next for you? And we help them to explore their first step in their journey. And then after we conclude our planning, then we can just let it draw to a conclusion and we can switch and go the other way. So after we do this, then we're going to all come back into the room and we're going to do a little bit of EPE along with this. So we'll have two little practice activities in one, basically. So is everybody ready to go do a motivational interview with a change target of how can I help my ally to explore their own improvement of their MI skills? Are we ready? Is it like MI exists? Like that's really what you get from the intro. It exists. The intermediate is like, okay, let me actually like try to like actually learn how to do this. Like that's what we're actually doing here. It's like, and the thing is we can say, well, am I a beginner or am I intermediate or where am I in the scale? Just being able to summon the feeling of curiosity means that you're already in the intermediate sphere. Just knowing curiosity is going to actually get me to, generally speaking, people are a heck of a lot less confrontational just by being curious. It's like more than half of motivational interviewing is just not bringing your own stuff into it and instead bringing curiosity. So that's an incredibly, like, and I mean, even as a motivational interviewing, you know, whatever I am, I still can find myself get hung up on things where I get pulled out of the curiosity and it's like, oh, actually, I wasn't doing motivational interviewing now. So, all right, so now that we've had this back and forth, we can actually practice our elicit, provide, elicit. So I was bouncing around the rooms. And I would like to, I gotta clear my throat just. So I was bouncing around the rooms looking for where there might be an opportunity for some feedback and saw a bunch of different things that I thought could be really, really interesting. So, oh crap, what was, who was it? Was I with the first one? Yes. So, Henrik, would you mind being a volunteer for me? So what I'm thinking is, could we actually, oh, are you there? Oh, okay. I heard some weird feedback for a second. I don't know what it was. So I want you to think back to when you first started your interview. And can you remember how the interview started? And I just want you to kind of reflect on what you, like, how did it open up?
So I think I just asked my partner a question about something about the MI state. And the question was intended to be sort of in the perspective of our progression here. Mm-hmm. But I think it was interpreted as more like, do you feel that you're within the MI band that you've been talking about right now?
Okay, so you opened up with some form of like, you know, engagement questions, really trying to get the conversation started. Can you remember like what the like, so you got a response, you know, something like I see how powerful it is, but I'm not sure I'm there yet. Do you remember how you like responded to that?
I was trying to reflect, because what she said was something that I heard as, I'm not sure that I'm being effective when I try to do MI, but, but wasn't used, but it was clear that in fact the method had worked for her. And then we talked about this occasion.
Yeah.
So clearly, I mean, she had been successful with MI, but was not sure about it.
Yeah. So there was.
Then I tried to acknowledge that you don't feel sure all the time, but you do succeed, at least sometimes.
Absolutely. So you absolutely did reflect, and I heard that reflection. And what's interesting is in this situation right now, you actually reflected back, in a specific order. So could I share a little piece of feedback? So do you remember the concept of the double-sided reflection?
I think in theory, yes.
Yeah, so the double-sided reflection is when you hear the other side either say a but or kind of like interpret somehow a but from the other side, and then giving the reflection just like you did, and just making sure that if you're reflecting both parts, both sides of the but, that you reflect the sort of resistance cheek before the change cheek. Okay, so a but has two cheeks, and you need to reflect the resistance cheek first. So
I actually don't remember, so probably I put them in the wrong order.
So what do you, if you were to go through something like that in the future, if you hold a but, how might you be able to like use that strong reflection you already have and bring it into the order where you end with the change side? Is there any way that you might be able to work with that?
Apart from practice, I'm not sure. I was no, I don't have a smart solution like tying a piece of string around my finger to remember it. So it's just like you have to make it second nature somehow.
Yeah, so ultimately this isn't a tie the string around the finger type of a situation. It's really just a, like, if you can practice like hearing the but and then practice trying to give it in the right direction, then that's ultimately the way to do it, is to just say, I'm gonna try and practice that. That's fair.
So but you mean hearing the but that I'm about to say myself, or the one that's implied by the statement that the statement that I'm trying to reflect?
I would actually say that the most important part to hear the but from is to hear the but in the audience. Because I observed when I went from room to room, incredibly strong listening skills in everybody, also in you, very, very strong reflections that I saw from you, Henrik. And so hearing that but can be a trigger to tell you, I'm in double-sided reflection territory. Mm-hmm. So if you can hear that, but and you did hear, because you actually did reflect both sides. Because so your mind heard the but, your mind knew the difference. So if you can consciously become aware of that but that other people are saying, then that can trigger you to say double-sided reflection. And that's what the double-sided reflection is most strong at. So that but can be used as a trigger to tell you to go into double-sided reflection mode. What do you think about something like that? Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so what I just tried to do here was I was also doing a attempt at demonstrating the concept of elicit, provide, elicit. So I did some eliciting from Henrik around a specific thing where I saw that there might be an opportunity to provide some feedback. I observed, there was some ambivalence on the other side. There was great strength, and then actually not that much weakness, but a little bit of weakness. It was almost more humility than weakness. So strength with a mix of weakness and humility on the other side. So, and the things that separated that was a but. So when we hear that, giving that back as, this weakness, humility thing, and then ending with this great strength so that they can kind of feel that greater power. So that was, we elicited, we provided, and then we say, how might something like that work for you? Or is there anything there for you? And maybe there is, maybe there's not. We just discovered that Henrik isn't going to tie a string around his finger, which is probably good for the health of the tip of his finger. What I'd like us to do now is let's actually have another kind of like practice, and then maybe we can go back to our breakout rooms and we can actually do the provide elicit with our partner. Where if we were the interviewee, then we can elicit from our interviewer, like, how did that go for you? Or was there something that you didn't like about, the way you did that interview? Maybe something that you felt didn't go so well. And then maybe they can come up with something that they didn't like about their own interviewing. And then we can provide. So what do we want to provide? So I want you to pick something off of this list. I want you to provide them one of the 4 language choices or one of the 4 processes. So I want you to offer complex reflection, emphasize autonomy, affirmation, or seek collaboration. I want you to offer one of those 4. So how might an affirmation have worked in that situation? How might a complex reflection have worked in that situation? How might is there any way that, focusing, or it seemed like the target became unfocused. I wonder, what might it have been like to try to refocus deeper? Maybe the topic was too big. Is there any way that refocusing even deeper could have been helpful? What do you think? So I want you to take one of those 8 options, one of the 4 language choices from the right-hand side of our spectrum, or one of the 4 processes, so engagement, focusing, evoking, or planning. If you're feeling frisky and you're feeling like you're there, you can give other feedback too, like, oh, what might a transitional statement have looked like? Or what might a summary have looked like? But if you're not sure if you want to do anything, you can always go back to one of those core 8 that we actually had full lessons on. Okay, so in review, we're going to go back to our breakout rooms. If we think we're ready, if we want to do another example round here in this room, then we can. And then when we go to the breakout rooms, we're going to, the interviewee is going to do elicit, provide elicit with their interviewer. And then we'll switch, and then the other interviewee will do elicit, provide elicit with their interviewer. So give me a, if you want to go to straight to the breakout room, you feel like you're ready, then type a B. If you want another example in the room that's not for me, but some other volunteers, then do a plus sign for another example. So B for breakout room or plus sign for another example.
Vince, could you just remind me what the 4 language choices are and the 4 processes are, please?
Yes. I see a lot of pluses so far. That seems to be the strong majority. So we'll go with another example in the live session. So the options that we have is, so our 4 processes are engagement, focusing, evoking, and planning. So we can look at, is there some way that we can actually diagnose that maybe a solution for them might be found in one of these 4 processes. And then the 4 statements or the 4 utterances that we might use would be affirmation, seek collaboration, complex reflection, and emphasize autonomy. Okay, so maybe they would like be in a situation where like the interviewee spoke about something that they were skilled at, and the interviewer didn't actually, like, let's say, affirm that. So we could evoke around, you know, how was that for you? And then they talk about something. It's like, well, how might affirmation have worked? And I think you know what? I think it might actually be easier for us to mix up the rooms, actually, because it could be too confusing to do Elicit, provide Elicit with the person who interviewed you. So maybe we should actually mix up the rooms when we go do it. I'm just realizing that could be better. But let's do another example right now. So I'm gonna ask 2 people to go through a process. Louisa, can I ask you to volunteer, or pass is always an option?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, and Maria, can I ask you to volunteer? And pass is an option.
Yes, I can volunteer.
Okay, so what I'd like, Louisa, could you just elicit a little bit about how Maria's interview went? And Maria, if you can summon, you know, whatever vulnerability you can find to kind of share maybe things that went well and also things that didn't go so well, so that Louisa might be able to like do some providing and eliciting from you about how you might be able to improve in your skills. Is that okay?
So that's for me as the interviewer.
Yeah, so Louisa is going to talk to you about your interviewing.
Yeah, so I never got the chance to interview. I was the interviewee.
Okay, so how about Louisa, did you get a chance to interview?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we just flip it around then, Maria? So you just draw out from Louisa about her interview.
Okay. Louisa, I heard you you gave an interview in motivational interviewing, and I'm just curious to hear how you felt that it went.
I think it went okay. I mean, I was with Wolfram and he thanked me at the end, so you know that was cool. Of course, it could have been being polite, and I mean, I don't think I remembered everything. I probably didn't do any affirmation, and enough affirmation, and I did some questions. I probably gave some advice as well. So rather than elicit more what Wolfram thought. Yeah.
So did you then feel like you had a lot to think about? You wanted to, it sounds to me like you wanted to go through a lot and achieve certain things and check off, maybe make sure you use some certain tools. And did you feel like it sounds to me like you did do a lot of that. So in that sense, I interpret that as that it went pretty well. Now I don't really know what I'm supposed to do.
Okay. Yeah. So so thank you very much for trying. And you know, there's I can feel the redness coming, right? Because you're being put on the spot to come up with something. So why don't I actually do this? So Maria, when you were just going through here, it seemed like in this last bit there was a lot going through your mind. You were trying to figure out, like, what do I do next? I know I'm supposed to give advice, but I don't have any advice to give. So I'm hunting and I'm looking for advice to give. And so I'm in a bit of a struggle right now. So do you mind if I actually, you know, share like a bit of feedback with that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so when we sometimes have that sort of like unsureness, then what has a tendency to happen, I've observed, is that our sentences go on because our unsureness fills in some like of the time, and we just kind of go forward, and our questions kind of become a bit closed off, and like become more like yes, no. So just using an open-ended question can bring in more elicit. So maybe for you, the process might be, instead of elicit, provide elicit, maybe elicit, 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 provide elicit. Because if you don't have anything to provide, then maybe you don't need to provide something. So what do you think about that? Is there anything there for you that you might be able to use?
Yeah, definitely. Also, something I wanted to use was the might, the word, but I couldn't figure out how to use it. In essence, just what kind of questions should I ask? I guess that was what I couldn't think of. So that's why it turned out the questions turned out the way they did.
Absolutely. And you want to know what, like, the fact that you didn't have a piece of feedback to give is actually wonderful. Because isn't that what we're all trying to do, which is to reach a point where maybe we don't necessarily need that feedback, or, you know, whatever. So then, like, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you don't need to give any feedback, then that's wonderful. Then you just be like, oh.
So then you don't have to do the provide step.
Exactly. If you don't have anything to provide her, then you don't need to provide her.
Yeah, you don't have to try to force something. You just leave it like that.
Yeah.
Good.
And I love what Thomas said and Wolfram, which is like, so we basically were doing motivational interviewing, and then we did a motivational interviewing technique about a motivational interview, and then I did a motivational interview about an MI about an MI. So it was like, I feel like I'm in the movie Inception right now.
Yeah.
Because there's, I actually said that you could just do MI instead of the entire movie of Inception, but that's significantly less exciting probably than, you know, you don't get Joseph Gordon-Levitt running on the walls, right? So, okay, so that was another example of our EPE. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Wolfram.
No, I just wanted to say what I really enjoyed when you did the last bit is that it came across as like very natural and just very well done. And it took me a second to realize that you were doing EPE. So, you know, yeah, I really enjoyed that. It's, he just is very good at giving feedback or provide advice. But then I realized, that's what he's actually doing. Yeah, just wanted to share this.
Exactly. And the fact that we were able to do it in that way, you're able to see that really EPE is just a feedback giving process. That's all EPE is. And if you don't have feedback to give, then you don't give feedback. So that's great. So this then becomes an opportunity for us to leverage our ability to not only grow our motivational interviewing skillfulness, because we can turn the EPE lens on ourselves, but we can practice our motivational interviewing skills in any situation where we have to give feedback to another human being. So if we have to give feedback to another human being, we can give that feedback in an MI styled way if we want to give that feedback in EPE style. And that can be a way for us to really grow our MI skillfulness. So we have a practice opportunity whenever we give feedback, if we practice giving feedback in an MI way. We also can then use our newfound way to give feedback to turn the lens of giving feedback on ourselves so that we can learn how to become better at the motivational interviewing skill set. So it's two different pathways. And then of course, there's 100 iterations of how you might actually use that, for yourself. So let's actually break it up now, and let's, Wolfram, can I ask you to scramble the rooms? So one thing that I just want to mention is, like, if we find ourselves in a situation where we feel there's like disingenuousness, or like, or if we kind of characterize like MI as sort of like a technique, being with somebody, then it is a technique or process where we ourselves are bringing our genuineness to the conversation. So if we ever feel like an artificiality that is coming in, the artificiality is kind of resting like within us. And I would just like to share that for me personally, the counter that I use in this type of an approach is I just bring my own acceptance and non-judgment that I oftentimes point towards other people in MI, but I also point it towards myself. So like I did that just a moment ago where I said, I'm looking at the clock and I feel a little bit of panic, like time is short and I have all these objectives that I want to accomplish. So I just open up and I accept the fact that that's where I'm at. And I genuinely let myself be like that in front of you. So that makes it so I can be authentic and it's a real thing. And when we look at motivational interviewing as the most evidence-based behavior change process that we know of, there's other evidence-based behavior change processes out there that are very efficacious. None of them work as quickly and as rapidly as motivational interviewing. And the reason why MI is special and different and better is because we don't choose whether they change or not. So it's always a situation where they decide. If we're working with somebody to try and like get them to, take on sort of like a stronger carbon price so we can try to like literally save the world type deal, like that would be nice, right? We would like to have that. But when we go into the motivational interviewing conversation, we are not assuming that our audience is going to take the behavior change that would be nice, that we would like for them to take, but we have to let go of that and just say, they get to decide. We're talking to, a politician. They were the one who was elected. They get to decide whether they pass the policy. They get to decide what the price is. There may be repercussions for one source or another, but they decide. So what I want us to do now is I want us to actually take a look at a few things. So I want to actually introduce you to the Mighty Manual. So can I ask everybody to just open up the Mighty Manual? Now, we're not going to be able to go through this in any detail. I actually have a Mighty coding class if you want to learn and experience more about the Mighty measurement system. But what I will do right now is I just want you to open that and I want you to just walk you through a few things. Maybe I'll actually even do screen share for this one. Okay, so On page 5, we have this cultivating change talk thing. So what this is this is what we refer to on the Mighty code as a global score. So if you were to, like, let's say, do a 20-minute one-to-one motivational interview with somebody on a topic, then you could apply this measurement system. And one of the measurements are these 4 global measurements, which is you would record your interview with the person, and then you would measure your language as an interviewer and say, was your language as an interviewer overall, after listening to it, was it a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? And so the way that you do this is you start at a 3, and if it feels like it's a little bit closer to a 4, then you kind of like shift to a 4, and then you check and say, was it closer to a 5? And then you shift to a 5. Or it feels like it might be less than a 3, and then you read this and you say, maybe a shift down. And the way that you do this is you look at these verbal anchors. So these are example behaviors of what high performance motivational interviewing looks like. So if you're trying to cultivate change talk, high performance on cultivating change talk, what does that look like? Over a series of exchanges, the clinician, and you just have to ignore the clinician, just say like me, I shape the interviewee's language in favor of change. Uses structured tasks as a way of eliciting and reinforcing change talk. So some of these things you might not necessarily know what they are. This is where a few of those book learning, where it's the learning feedback and practice comes in. So what are some of these structured tasks? Does not usually miss opportunities to explore more deeply when client offers change talk. So I heard in one room somebody said, well, I heard strengths being mentioned, but I don't think I affirmed them. And I think that was a missed opportunity. So at the 5 level, does not miss opportunity. So then looking at how if I can look at myself and say, I missed that opportunity, that is an incredible moment. That's amazing. That right there is what giving yourself feedback is all about, which is looking at something like this and say, does not miss opportunity. So did I miss an opportunity to explore somebody's client change talk more deeply, whatever? And if you can find an opportunity where you missed it, that's a situation where in the future, you might not miss that opportunity, or you'll be less likely to miss opportunities in the future. So that's what these verbal anchors and these examples are all about, is giving you sort of something to aspire to. And there's 4 of these global, so softening, sustain talk. So once again, you have like, let's look at the 4 level. Does not explicitly ask for reasons not to change. Does not seek to elaborate the individual sustain talk. So you heard sustain talk, maybe you reflected it in a double-sided reflection, so then you didn't actually elicit more sustain talk. And then there's partnership and empathy. So these are the 4 globals, and there's these verbal anchors. So if you're trying to do the elicit, provide, elicit, and turn it towards yourself, if you can look at your own interview from a critical lens, but not one where you judge yourself, but one where you sort of look at failure as a victory. Look at, I missed that opportunity. Yes, yes. And so if you can get excited about, I missed that opportunity, then you'll be like, okay, so then you can basically tell your brain that I saw it. Now that's the thing I'm not going to do next time. Yay. And if you can generate that excitement, you can really help your brain to kind of recode you out of kind of that behavior. So it's a way for you to kind of try and take a little bit of manual control over, Well, your brain's going to teach you when you sleep and do all that neural development. Then deeper in this thing, we have, here's all of our codes. And this is going to talk about, like, when does something fall into one category or another category? So, well, here's what an emphasized autonomy might look like, or here's what a complex reflection might look like. So it'll give you examples of what these different things might look like. And so when you look at the, so here's a bunch of examples of persuade, but then you might be able to say it in slightly different ways, where it's like, well, is that a persuade or is it a seek collaboration? Is that a persuade or giving information? Sometimes there's gray area. So this can potentially help you to kind of break down where that gray area is. Interestingly, with this guide, there could even be different ways to say this in your tone that could actually shift it. So like, for example, this one is coded as seek. I have some information about your risk of problem drinking, and I wonder if I can share it with you. Okay, so that's a seek collaboration tone. Then we could also say this in a different way. We could say it as a persuade, and it would probably be more of a persuade if we said it in a different tone. I have some information about your risk of problem drinking, and I wonder if I can share that with you. Okay, so that's even more like a confront. So the tone shifts it. But you can see some examples of, like, let's say of a more modest tone, what they might kind of look like. And then last but not least, this is a sort of mighty in a nutshell. The mighty code in a nutshell is, this is just a form for you to kind of count everything up. But where are the results? Come on, my results, little box. There's a box somewhere, there it is. So these are like the objectives, the goals of what you're trying to accomplish. So total MI adherent, that's what the MIA stands for, or total MI non-adherent. So MI non-adherent is like confronts and persuades. But here we see reflection to question. Oh, do we have a question? Oh, so this is the reflection to question ratio. So a 1-to-1 is just like, what's really good, what we're really shooting for is 2-to-1. So we always want more reflections than questions. So when I like give some of this feedback about, like, you know, what we want to do, and when we want more complex reflections than simple reflections, this is where that feedback is coming from, is from the mighty code. We know that more complex reflections is better than more simple reflections. We know that more reflections are better than questions. Yeah, so anyway, so that's enough with that. So that was about 5-8 minutes or so didactic on the mighty code. So let's hear questions, thoughts, feelings. James?
Yeah, I wonder how ready we are, instead of just having a note taker in our lobby meetings, to have a MITI PowerBook coding expert recording exactly how we do in our lobby sessions.
I mean, that's actually interesting. I literally have been racking my brain about, like, you know, what is the right process for, like, doing MI with a group the way that CCL goes in. And I think that you just solved a question. I've been really wanting to collaborate with CCLers on making a design of how we actually can be more effective, or how we can apply MI in a group setting. And I love that idea.
Okay, I'll be honest, I put that idea up because I thought it was almost completely over the top and ridiculous that we might do it. But actually, in the meeting notes that the US ship out as a pro forma, they include, or we included in the European one, what used to be called AROSE, which was the acronym they used for some of the technique on questioning, reflection, and so on. So what strikes me is actually if we could include in the notes pro forma that we give to people taking the notes, a role where they at least try and count some of the things that are done there, that could be a real interesting way of encouraging both the use of the technique in lobby sessions and also the self-awareness in the group as to how well we do it. Because of course, in a group, it's much more difficult to cooperate over motivational interviewing than it is one-to-one when it's just your headspace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that it really seems like a brilliant idea. And the thing is like, and this is where the Elicit provide Elicit in your debrief of the session could be really, really valuable. So like taking those notes, if you can locate, persuades, but also affirmations, then you can affirm the use of affirmation. You can affirm the use of emphasize autonomy. You can affirm the good behaviors and help them to become more prevalent. And if you find a persuade, you can actually like draw that out and say, can you tell me a little bit more about what you were thinking when this happened? He had just said this and you said this. And I coded this as a persuade. Can we chat a little bit about, what you think was going on there for you? And then it's like, oh, and then they can kind of talk about it. And it's like, okay, so if you were to do something different, what might you want to do? Or we could actually say, do you think a complex reflection might have actually worked really good there? What do you think? So that could be an opportunity and then draw out from them. Yeah.
So I'm just trying to be realistic here as well as we tend to do at least a 20-minute, half an hour prep before a lobby call. A lobby call will be 30 to 45 minutes. We might then spend another 20 to 30 minutes afterwards reflecting on how it went and what the actions are and who does what, to then add for a lobby session where volunteers are giving up their own time, chunks of time to go through that process, could add substantially to how onerous it is. So I guess I'm really interested in what people in the group think might be a practical way of trying to do this in a light way so that we learn and develop the skills, but don't overload the process with motivational interviewing. Sorry, I've taken a load of the question time.
James.
Yeah, Catherine.
Perhaps we could just get a chart which people could download with the kind of key methodology that we're trying to use, and they could just tick where they see that happening, and just to give a kind of quick idea about whether the lobby was successful in terms of MIT, or whether it was confrontational or not. And then maybe if if it was added to the lobbying information that we have, so that people could, a quick guide to MI, so that when people get used to using it, it becomes second nature, but a bit like a teacher grading your work or whatever.
So I just really want to honor what both of you just said there, which is, I think there's a lot of different ways that it could be rolled out. And I really also want to just say that like the idea of it being like an onerous thing at the end does feel just as aversive to me as I think it does to you, James. And I think most people don't want an onerous experience. Nobody wants to have somebody looking with a hypocritical eye. So generally speaking, I would say that like maybe 1, max 2 rounds of Elicit provide Elicit is probably plenty. Maybe even just looking at like 1 utterance, like could be enough for continuous improvement of one's own skillfulness. And like literally just seeing a single persuade and looking at that That could just be in that 20-minute debrief that you say is already there. Maybe just in, like actually just doing one round of Elicit, provide Elicit in that pre-existing 20-minute debrief could be something that could be useful maybe. Because yeah, 4 rounds of Elicit, provide Elicit, people can't take in that much feedback. Even if it is an MI way, like this, we can't change that many things at once. We don't have the brain power to do it. Timo.
That makes sense. That's a nice lightweight suggestion. After the arose thing, I know we put when we originally did the face-to-face lobbying in Brussels, we tried to get just a score of 1 to 3 for whether we used it minimally, a bit, or we felt we used it well. So I think combining that with maybe allowing 1 or 2 people just to highlight something that was either good or could be better in that EPE process would be enough and lightweight enough to do a bit of learning, but not overload it. So I think that's really practical. Thank you.
Yeah, and getting that, and Timo, in just 1 second, if there was one person who was the lead speaker, that conversation might be a little bit easier to have if it was just the recorder and the speaker alone, because if it's the whole group with the speaker might be put into a situation where they have to feel defensive, and we really want to be able to draw out an Elicit from the speaker where they don't have to feel defensive, because if they can't look at the persuade as sort of like a victorious failure, then that's going to limit their ability to improve in the future. So maybe taking those 2 and letting them have the conversation separately instead of as a whole group. Timo.
Yeah, the structure of talks, as James said, is always quite similar, but how the talk is developing, you never know before. And it depends also on the persons, and it depends also on how often you met the person already, if it's the second time or third time. And so I think, yeah, one idea could be that someone from the group with some experience can start the question part in a motivational interviewing kind of way. And this is because this you can plan. Yeah, usually we start the talk. And if you are a bit more progressed with someone you meet for the second or third time, you know already what the person is kind of, you know, the, let's say, strong and weak points, the personality. And so I think then you can think about making the next steps in motivational interviewing in the second talk, like also what we did today, maybe that you can give your own opinion into the talk carefully, or that with the summaries and collecting, reflecting, so that you collect a bit more puzzle pieces from the personality and the blockades the person has. And so I think it's really complex, but it's completely right. This MI technique cannot be easily transformed into how we usually do our talks. I think we need kind of strategy, maybe.
I want to pick up on the point Timo made there about we normally start with a very structured setup in the first meeting. And that was also historically true for us in Europe. But actually, we've been getting excited about this technique over the last few weeks, and quite a few people have been experimenting with a more fluid structure, not the rigid CCL approach. So just like Timo was saying then for the second or third meeting, we've actually been risking starting our first meetings with questions, not assuming we're going to even present the policy. And on occasions, it doesn't get presented till halfway through or near the end of the meeting, but the relationship is much more secure. And we've really seen the differences in that because we've listened and reflected before we've done our pitch. So I'd like to take Timo's point and encourage people to experiment with doing it earlier and even in first meetings, because even though we're kind of crumbling around with our first wobbly steps with motivational interviewing, the people who've experimented have been really encouraged by what we've seen with that. So I just wanted to reinforce that point. It was really nice.
Well, I mean, thank you for everybody here. And I think that with this group, what we're doing in CCL Canada, what we're now doing in CCL US, I think that this is going to be an evolving conversation. And I want to evolve with all of you and to learn from you about how MI can actually fit this model more accurately so that I can go out and do more trainings and learn from you about how these trainings can actually be really, really effective within CCL's engagement model. So definitely am really interested in learning from all of you on your experiences and whatnot. So we have only a short amount of time left. So I'm just gonna look at my agenda here and see what we can still try to pull through. I think that the next most important thing is for us to actually take a look at the homework. And I really want to be able to spend the time here because this is going to be more important than anything else we could do, even in this entire session, is making, well, not making anything, helping you to feel like you can take this homework and utilize it. I hope that it will be effective for you. And, you know, if it's not, then please do let me know, but so that way we can make some changes to it as well. But I'm going to go on screen share for a second and let's look at this together. So learning, practice, and feedback. Okay, so today we were still doing some learning, but we were really trying to get our feet wet on this practice and feedback more so than on some of our earlier sessions. What the rest of all of these things down here is going to be about is more on the practice and feedback side of things. So this right here, if you want to practice with people, let's say in a non-CCL like sort of lobby setting, the skills of MI are incredibly transferable. I got into the Mint community, which is like the highest body for motivational interviewing, by doing a motivational interview on smoking. I had never in my life done a motivational interviewing with somebody before on the topic of smoking, and I was able to perform at a level that got me into this community. So practicing the MI skills outside of the context with which you are learning the skills to really, you know, apply them, you really want to like go out and do them with you know, your MPs and whatnot. Practicing with your children, your family, or practicing with friends on all sorts of different change topics are incredibly variable. And so this right here is permission to be video recorded. So if you take this and just print it out as a form and ask somebody to sign it, then you'll be able to record and use that to self-evaluate. This right here as permission to be video recorded, you all have the PowerPoint and an editable PowerPoint. You can edit this if you want. You can, for example, say, you could delete this if you really wanted to. Right now, if you actually keep it as it is, then you can, with that video with somebody else who is your training learning partner, and you can reflect on your video with somebody else who's going to be an ally to look at how you can improve. So that's really what this is all about. And then it says that neither my name, so there's a lot here to protect the interviewee. And it says that the video content will never be published in any way. And, you know, in the event that any new applications such as publishing or sharing, if that is ever sought by interviewer or subject, then express written permission must be made in a follow-up agreement. So basically, this is not authorizing any use of it to be shared. So I just wanted to say that that's there for you. So questions on that first before I go forward. Okay, so What I will say is we have done video recorded practice sessions with a number of people here already. This is the most powerful way that you have to learn. When you do an interview with somebody, you record it and you watch yourself back, you will see yourself do a persuade probably. Seeing yourself do a persuade and then watching as your audience becomes more resistant is going to do more for your MI skill development than any other thing that can be done. That will help your MI skill development as much as this entire 6-session series. It is phenomenal the amount of change that that can cultivate in you, because it becomes crystal clear in your mind of like, oh, victorious failure. Okay, so let's carry on. So accountability partner. So who do we have that we can actually be accountable with, where we can go through this journey? We know that accountability is a big part. We know that there's a risk that we can learn motivational interviewing, and then we can go through this entire series and we can say, well, that was a really nice experience. I learned a lot. And we can kind of have, you know, a bit of the skill set. But are we actually going to go out and use it to accomplish something? So having an accountability partner or having an implementation team, either of those things are going to really be some form of accountability to say, let's actually go out and slay using this. I'm thinking like this drag queen named Shea Coulee. I didn't come to play, I came to slay. So let's slay. Then our next one is, so conducting the interviews. So we can conduct the interviews with our accountability partner. Okay, so in this last sequence that we just did, or like over the course of like the past month or two, we have, I actually wrote down a laundry list. I had like a paper sitting next to me and I had like 25 different topics of things that I was ambivalent on that I might need to make a change on. And then I did motivational interviews. You all motivational interviewed me on all the changes that I need to make in my life. And I did this and I was just sort of like, at the end, I was like, okay, so now I'm like a perfect human. Like I figured it all out. Thanks, everybody. So, of course, I'm being farcical, but like, so if you and an accountability partner want to actually do like a laundry list of motivational interviews with each other, that can be an incredible learning opportunity for you to grow your skillfulness and also to get some of your crap resolved. So, so that right there is something that, you know, it's up to you whether that works for you or not. So who can you actually do interviews with that are going to be that practice? Okay, back to screen share. Okay, so mighty coding the interview. Okay, so when we mighty code the interview, we can offer a mighty coding workshop series here if you want. And we can talk about that in a second. I only have like, I think one more slide after this. So maybe we should spend our last few minutes talking about if we want that. But ultimately, we take this video recording and we try to look at it and say, oh, there was an emphasized autonomy, there was a persuade, there was a, and when we see those things, we say, how might blank have worked for you in that situation where you did that persuade? How might one of the 4 processes have worked for you in blank situation? How might rolling with resistance have worked for you in that situation where, you know, they were really resistant? How might a brainstorm have worked for you in that situation where they were like kind of drawing a blank and then they just kind of were feeling stuck? How might a double-sided reflection have worked for you in that situation where they felt ambivalent and they kind of felt like both good and bad about it? So that's what the Mighty Coding, the interview is designed to do, is to give you these EPE opportunities. Oh, was somebody about to say something? Okay. And then, okay, so custom applications. So this is the last thing. So let's say you want to communicate using blank channel for blank topic in a more MI-spirited way. So how might I apply this sort of MI feedback to make blogging for climate activism more effective? How might I use rolling with resistance in blogging for climate activism to be more effective? Okay, so this is disaggregating and looking at the MI skill set outside of a one-to-one communication. This entire idea wasn't created by me. It was actually created when a colleague of mine, one of the other MI intermediate students, came up to me and said, I want to write a blog about veganism, but I don't know how. Because everything that's out there, everything I've ever done has always been confrontational. And I just don't want to do that anymore. And I was like, that is a wonderful question. So I spent a while thinking about it. And I was like, you basically just write the blog from an MI perspective. So going through the 4 processes. And if you're thinking about telling a story, well, write the story as a reflection. Or if you're thinking about reasons, we know if we bring up our reasons, they can often bring out resistance. So it's like, well, here are some of my reasons, but I realize that those reasons don't necessarily resonate. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about why this is important to me, and then say, you know, what reasons might you have for, you know, veganism? What do you think? You know, and so like actually writing that into a blog could be incredibly engaging. Okay, so that right there is the homework. So everybody has that. And that's sort of like all of these exercises are designed to be repeatable. That you can go through this, and each time you repeat it, maybe you find, well, I do these environmental communications, how can I do them in a new way? And also increase my skillfulness and effectiveness at the same time. I do have a little ask. Because I've been trying to work on my LinkedIn profile, and I only have 3 people who have like validated that I am any good at motivational interviewing on LinkedIn. So if you think that I'm good at LinkedIn, if you wouldn't mind giving me, or if I'm good at motivational interviewing, give me a thumbs up. So it doesn't look like I have no business training in the space. And if you like the experience, write me a recommendation or something like that. So that's my ask, because I just want my profile to look like what I actually do and care about, because right now my LinkedIn profile really doesn't. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, I would greatly appreciate it. So that is my ask, if you don't mind, and thank you. Yes, okay, so it's for it.